So first, some introductions. My name is Jill Meyers, and I am so honored to be hosting this interview series, especially today's series with the incredible Carole Hopson. So a bit about me. I've been passionate about aviation since I first went up in a small plane at the age of 12. Got my pilot's license at 17, walked into the Air Force with my pilot's license and got the, "oh, but you're a girl" response. So I wasn't allowed to fly, but I joined anyway. Later became an aerospace engineer, spent most of my career building really awesome aircraft. And I have been connected with the Red Door films and the amazing Mattia and Hilary since 2016, when I helped plan and emceed an event in Carlsbad, California, north of San Diego. The top two photos are from that event. On the left is me with Mattia, and on the right is me with B. Haydu, one of the WASP who sadly passed away recently. If you want to hear Mattia's story, by the way, of her connection to the WASP and why we're all here today, you can go to the Facebook page of Fly Girls and you can watch last week's interview where she told that story. Now I'd like to introduce Hilary Prentice from the Red Door films. Hilary has been working with Mattia since 2015 and is producing the Coming Home documentary, as well as their dramatic series called Fly Girls. Hilary recently collaborated with Mattia on both the Emmy-nominated HBO film The Tale and on Fabrice Joubert's film Safety. Hilary's also producing Mattia's new feature film called The Boy on the Bus, and is also working with Emmy-winning writer Chuck Sklar, producing his first feature film, Caught Stealing, with Chris Rock. And our very special guest today is Carole Hopson. I just love Carole's story, as she followed her childhood dream to become a pilot after spending 20 years as a journalist and an executive. And at the peak of her corporate accomplishments, Carole walked away from those executive level positions to learn to fly and become a flight instructor, all while raising a family. Carole's currently a first officer for United Airlines based in Newark, New Jersey, and flies the Boeing 737. Carole is also the author of a historical fiction novel that you see here called A Pair of Wings, based on the life of the pioneer aviatrix, Bessie Coleman, one of my favorite women in aviation history. The book officially released on June 15th of this year, which was the 100th anniversary of the day that Bessie earned her own pair of wings. Carole, thank you so much for joining us today. And I do want to say that this book is incredible. I have it. I bought it the day it came out. Everybody needs to read this book. Carole, someday I would like you to sign this for me, ma'am. Let's get that done. All right, so first, let's just chat briefly about the documentary. So Hilary, why don't you tell everyone your ties to the WASP and how you got involved with Mattia and in the Coming Home project?
Thank you so much, Jill. And I just have to give Jill major props for being just an incredible woman in her own right and introducing us to Carole. So we would not be here without you. So thank you so much. And I met Mattia about 12 years ago from a colleague who was telling me that there were women pilots in World War II. And as a history major, I went, what? I never heard about women pilots in World War II. Like, that's insane. How could I have not known? And I was a bit angry that I didn't know that these women weren't mentioned anywhere, not at the high school or college level, you know. So I had dinner with her and I started bugging her, you know, this has got to be a movie. And she said, you know, you're right. And I'm trying. And I said, let me help you. And we've run into, believe it or not, a lot of pushback from the industry with people not knowing where the story is. You know, there's all different kinds of excuses. You know, the women weren't in combat. You know, okay, but you know what they did was incredibly dangerous, and so they have to be, you know, on the field of battle in order to make a good story like that. You know, where's the imagination? So we've set about changing hearts and minds, and I think that we've proven ourselves. Our Facebook reaches about 5 million, 3 to 5 million a month. People, when we came out with images of these women people were over the moon. They just could not believe it. And what's been amazing is taking this story of these women in the 40s and expanding it to include women like Bessie Coleman, who inspired many of the WASP. And I mean, Bessie's story, my God, if we all say we can't do it, just look to someone like Bessie Coleman. I mean, and Carole, I absolutely love that you took her and put her in the first person, and we really get inside her and what she's thinking and feeling. And that's what we as storytellers, as filmmakers, you know, that's what we have to do with our documentary. Even though it's a documentary, it's meant to feel like a narrative, to really capture the hearts and minds of our viewers so that they can really put themselves in the shoes of these women pilots and be inspired and hopefully go on and take that message out into the world. So that's what we're doing here. And this interview series is a part of that. So thank you so much, both of you.
Really, really great. Thanks, Hilary. And I just want to quickly mention, because, you know, again, as we've all experienced, a lot of people don't even know who the WASP are. So just real quick, the Women Air Force Service pilots flew every single military aircraft made during World War II between 1942 and 44. And the image that is behind Hilary's and my Zoom screen, just so you all know, is of, we'll get out of the way. It's of Avenger Field, which is the place that they all did initial training in Sweetwater, Texas. There's a museum there, and you're all welcome to travel to Sweetwater and visit. So Carole, let's get to you now. As I said earlier, I love mid-career, if you want to call it that, changes in people. So the first thing I'd like you to talk about, though, is what was your initial spark that got you interested in aviation in the very beginning when you were young?
Well, first, Jill, thank you for the question. But before we start, I have to tell you, when you guys played that teaser, the sizzler of the movie, first of all, I can't wait to see it. Secondly, I can't thank you enough for having me on and for reading my book and being such a cheerleader. I must say, when you do the research that you all did, when you do the research that I did that lasted 12 years, it is wonderful when you come out of your own brain and you put something down and have somebody cheer. So thank you. And I cheer you. This movie looks fabulous. And I applaud you for taking this on. So, and I have a lot of things to say about the WASP. I love them. I had the great fortune of eating lunch with Bee. Hi, do. She was delightful. I met her at Women in Aviation, and we had lunch together and chatted, and she was a remarkable human being. The world gets a little dimmer without her star, but she gave us so much. So there we go. I'll start the question. I wanted to fly airplanes just like you since I was a little girl. I can't remember a time when I didn't want to fly airplanes, when I wasn't fascinated, when I didn't look up in the sky as one came overhead. And I had the great fortune of having amazing parents and grandparents. And my grandmother in South Jersey on the approach path to Philadelphia International Airport. When I was a little girl, I used to go lay out in the grass and look at the airplane. And as I got older, I used to look at the airplanes, and it was a way to get out my chores. I can't do the dishes. I'm looking at airplanes. And I can't remember a time when I didn't want to fly planes. I went to college. I went to graduate school. I met the man who would become my husband. And on a date, he asked me a question. He said, "What do you want to do with yourself? What is your heart's desire?" And when he said that, I said to him, "I'm going to tell you. And if I tell you and you laugh at me, I'll never see you again. You won't get any of this." And I meant it. I didn't want to be ridiculed for something that seemed ridiculous to finally leave my lips. And I just blurted it out. I want to fly an airplane. I was 30. And by the time we met for another date, he gave me a gift certificate to the local flight school. And I took a lesson. And I knew as we left the ground, I knew that that was what I was meant to do. Just like that woman said in the teaser, I knew that's what I was meant to do.
That's great. And your comments about always looking up, I think a lot of us share that. And it's great when I meet little kids who are already looking up, at the sky at 6, 7, 8 years old, right? And have that bug planted so early. Someone on Facebook, Carole, put a note, Mary Scott said, be sure to ask Carole about eagle flight and say hi. So was there an eagle flight involved in this somehow in your journey?
Hello, Mary. And yes, eagle flight. So here's what's remarkable. In the backyard, I lived in Montclair, New Jersey for 23, 24 years. And in our backyard was this amazing gem and a jewel started by a man, Reverend Russell White. And he saw kids hanging out in the street corner in Orange and East Orange in Irvington, New Jersey. And he had some training, had been a helicopter pilot. He said, geez, I want to change the way that my community looks. He got a firehouse for $1 from the city of East Orange, New Jersey. And Mary was one of the amazing young women who came to Eagle Flight and spent time with us there. And we did ground school and we taught kids to fly. And it was just a remarkable, remarkable thing, and still exists today. I spend a lot of time with the Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals. I have literally grown up with OBAP, but before I grew up with OBAP, I grew up with Eagle Flight. And it was a dream. It was something to get people off the street corner. And we launched from Eagle Flight, geez Louise, a dozen pilots who are in the airlines today, and many more men and women who grew up to believe that they could do something that was, as the name of your show, they could dare to do something different. And Reverend White set us on that path. And Mary and I wound up sitting next to each other on an airplane about a month and a half ago. And so anyway, just remarkable how things happen. And today she is leading airports and doing many amazing things. But that kernel, that grain started in East Orange Firehouse by a man who had a vision to dare to do things differently.
That's fantastic. I'm from Philadelphia, by the way, so I know you're part of the world pretty well. For those just joining us, by the way, I'm Jill Meyers here interviewing Hilary Prentice from the Red Door Films and the unbelievably inspiring Carole Hopson, United Airlines pilot and author of this amazing book, A Pair of Wings, about Bessie Coleman. All right. So Carole, moving forward then, so you are 20 years into a career and that bug in the back of your head is constantly, you're still looking at airplanes in the sky, right? So what gave you the courage to make that change? Because I have been in the aviation aerospace industry now for 40 years, and I can't tell you how many people I've come across who really desire to do something, but just cannot get over that threshold. So tell us where you got the courage to make that change and go start flying.
Well, thank you for that. It's such a good question. You're absolutely right. People say all the time, how did you pivot? Now, when I did this 20 years ago, I don't know that I actually thought about it as a pivot. I don't know that I thought about it as a trend or something to do. I knew that I wanted to fly and that it was my passion. And here's what I also knew. Big decisions, big changes happen with small interests. Small changes lead to great big ones. And so by the time I got ready to walk away from a 6-figure a year job, and I had learned by that time that I was going to make $17 an hour, I was ready because I had saved my money. And I had saved my money because I knew that flight training was very, very expensive. And I didn't want to start and stop and start and stop. I had learned through Women in Aviation and through Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals that the best or the most successful changes or pivots were people who were ready, right? They were ready financially and they were ready with good mentors. And at Women in Aviation, I met a wonderful woman named Captain Jenny Beatty. And it was at my very first Women in Aviation convention where I quit my job that Jenny gave me a coffee mug. And that coffee mug had a picture of Bessie Coleman on one side and 2 paragraphs about her life on the other side. I had never heard of her. Almost like Hilary said, I was angry. How could it be? I college grad, Ivy League graduate school, white collar. How could I never have heard of that woman? It seemed an outrage. How come I never heard of the Wasps? How come I had never heard of successful, extraordinary women? They were never in a history book. They never existed in any textbook, high school, college, graduate school. I'd never heard of them. And so in my brain, I let the idea of Bessie Coleman germinate. September 11th happened 3 months after I had finished all my certificates. I started in September of 2000. And by June of 2001, I was instructing. 0 or 1 flight hour because I had taken a discovery flight to certified flight instructor in 8 months.
It's amazing.
I was moving. And then June, July, August, September 11th. And we're right upon the anniversary date that changed so many people's lives. And my husband, by this time, we got married and we moved to New Jersey so that I could fly. We lived in Manhattan before that. And he said to me this. He said, you know, not your career, but your industry is going to be circling. It's going to be circling. And when people are ready to hire again, you'll be ready. But in the meantime, we should have some children. And I was like, oh my goodness, like, really? He said, really? And by September 17th, I was pregnant. Best thing I'd ever done. Best thing in the world I've ever done. And before I know it, I had 1 baby and then another. I had an infant and a toddler and getting back to flying a regional airline seemed so far. So in the interim, I was a flight instructor and we happened to be playing in a field, my husband and my children and I. It was dusk and my husband said, hey, you know, I see 2 biplanes. I said, really? And I came out of the corn maze. We were chasing each other. And as I came out of the corn maze, he said, I think that's a Stearman. I said, it is 1942. He said, oh my gosh. I said, next to it? I said, that's a WACO, Washington Aviation Company. 1941 is my guess. He said, you know, I love a girl who knows her planes. So in we went in the car and we looked, and indeed it was the Stearman WACO. And the guy who was there was amazing. He's become a very good friend of mine. I would go on to do stunts in that airplane to really learn. Now that airplane was 20 years newer than Bessie, 20 years. It was a World War II airplane versus World War I. But I would go on to learn what it was like to fly in an open air airplane. I would go on to learn many more things about Bessie Coleman. And it was on that date that I decided to write the book. Now, how to write the book. I started as an omniscient narrator. And then after that, that didn't work. I couldn't get close enough. Then I started as her girlfriend, who was an amalgam of women I met in my research. Largely Black women who were cooks and seamstresses. And then I learned more and more about Bessie Coleman. Born in 1892, she was 11 when the Wright brothers made their first flight on December 17, 1903. She was the child of a slave. Woo. She picked cotton. She was a maid. And yet she wanted to fly so badly that she figured out how to make a way where there was none. She learned to speak French at age 25, 26, 27. By the time she was in her late 20s, she was ready. And that's what I mean about those lessons, being ready. And so I needed to be ready. And so I followed her and realized that the only way to write this book was first person and to step into her shoes. And I wrote that down when Hilary said that. I literally bought a pair of boots in which I flew the Boeing 737 in today. And those boots were made such that the bottom was just leather. It wasn't like we have Nike Air, and I don't want to do a commercial for anybody, but nice, soft. It wasn't like that. It was just leather. And she walked 9 miles from the town where she could afford to stay to flying on the beach in L'Equateur, France. And so while she was there, she would train during the day. And when she was finished, she would walk back the 9 miles. I got myself down to her weight. I haven't been there in a while, I might add. And I walked the 9 miles that she walked in her shoe. And do you know what? Parts of that journey were amazing, and parts of it were terrifying. Through the north of France, from the beach all the way to an inn, at night in the dark on dirt road. And I wept. I wept at thinking about how difficult her challenge must have been. And that's what you read in that book.
So a lot of similarities, I think, between the sacrifices and the passion and the effort that all of these women went through. Hilary, do you want to comment on how that relates to the WASP and how Bessie Coleman and the WASP sort of go together in a way?
Oh, you don't have the WASP without Bessie Coleman. And that's the thing about our documentary. And you don't have women pilots today without the WASP. Everybody stands on the shoulders of the people who come before. And we really feel here at the Red Door Films that in order to really have a good understanding of our present, we must have a complete and full picture and understanding of our past. And it just makes us a much better society. And Carole, I just have to ask you, can you tell us a little bit about your day today, since you've got your incredible uniform on there, and maybe for some people just joining?
Oh, you're very kind. So I take that question as the day in the life of, and it was quite a day. So I woke at 4. I was out the door at about 5:15. My show time was 6:14 at Newark Airport. And we left Newark, flew to Sarasota, Florida, 968 miles. And then we left Sarasota, Florida, and we flew to Chicago, which is in my background right here. The Chicago River is right behind me or beneath me. I'm on I don't know, I got to check my key, 21st floor. And it was just windy as I don't know what getting into doggone Chicago. But thunderstorms in the south, windy in the Midwest, and you are absolutely right. We don't get here without Bessie Coleman, without the WASP. Just going back to them for a second, I was so struck, certainly by Bessie Coleman, obviously. My husband and I named our second boy, well, my husband named him Coleman. The love that I feel for a woman who I feel led the way, who was 20 years before the WASPs, who was 2 years before Amelia Earhart. So one of the things that I learned from was that the WASPs were never militarized. And you got into that a little bit in the program, so that they never had health and dental benefits. Ooh, they didn't have the veteran benefits in older years. Many of them would write notes to family members, hey, take care of my daughter because I had to leave when she was a couple months old. And then when they returned, many didn't have benefits, the financial benefit to pick up where they had left off. Oh my God.
That's right.
That's an outrage. Like, we would be so upset if we learned that a vet didn't get their due when they came back from service. They taught men to fly, they flew, they delivered supplies, oh my goodness, like what else?
They tested the aircraft. We wouldn't have the B-29, which ended the war, without the WASP. That was piloted by 2 WASP, and the men refused to fly it. We wouldn't have the B-26. We wouldn't have the B-25. I mean, there's so many aircraft. That's why, when people say to me, certain people in the industry, oh, they weren't in combat. I'm like, we wouldn't be flying. They were involved in drone technology, and their record was impeccable. And unfortunately, as our documentary uncovers and shares with the world for the first time, they were there was a coordinated smear campaign, a publicity smear campaign against them, which took hold in Congress. And people today would not believe what these congressmen actually called these women in these hearings. Unbeknownst to them, meanwhile they're off risking their lives every day, and they're towing targets behind their airplanes so that our gunners can shoot at them with live ammunition. I mean, if that's not in combat,
gunners in training, by the way, who weren't necessarily a good shot. Yeah,
they were in training, and they were towing targets. And Beverly Biesmeyer, one of our main characters, who passed away, still has her targets from this target practice, and riddled with bullet holes. And Edna, one of our WASP, nearly died in training when she was being fired at in the air, actually, by some Chinese airmen who were being trained by us. So this was nothing to be.
Yeah, it's quite shocking. The WASP didn't obtain military or veteran status, I should say, until 1977, which, B was one of the people you'll see in the documentary who really led that effort. And they then got the Congressional Gold Medal of Honor from President Obama in 2010. But what's also really shocking, I don't know if it's in your story, Hilary, they weren't allowed to be buried in Arlington National Cemetery until 2016, when I'm very honored to say a friend of mine named Erin Miller went to bury her grandmother, Elaine Danforth, who they first said, no, she can't be buried here. Erin's like, what do you mean? So they weren't allowed to be buried next to their fellow veterans until just a few years ago. So the whole journey from the 40s until, really getting them full rights in this last decade is really kind of shocking. So just really quick, for those just joining, we are here with Hilary Prentice from the Red Door Films, and Carole Hopson, an amazing author and really inspiring pilot, talking about this documentary called Coming Home, about the World War II Air Force service pilots. So Hilary, can you talk about, because oh, and by the way, if anyone has questions for us, for any of us, please put them in the Facebook comments and they will be fed to me to do out loud. So if you have questions for anyone specifically, please say who it's for. Otherwise, we'll pick someone to respond, or we all will. So Hilary, please give us a little bit of information about this partnership between the Red Door Films and Kent State University. You can talk about that program and how it's going to help the future next generation of folks interested in aviation. I would love you to share that with everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Jill. And Carole, it sounds like we'll have to speak offline about Eagle Flight, because what we intend to do with Kent State University is to, we have a program called Pathways to Flight, and it's to use the documentary as part of education, outreach, and mentorship. And it's to encourage women as well as minorities, underrepresented groups, and women and minorities, because sometimes people ask us why we're focused on those groups, and we are underrepresented as pilots. I don't have the stats right in front of me, but I think it's about 6% of pilots are women. Jill can probably correct me. Of that 6%, I don't know how many percent are African American or
I think it's
women.
about 2. Right?
Yeah,
Carole, 2-ish.
I would love to give you those numbers, but I don't want to interrupt.
Oh yeah, no, you can interrupt away. Tell our audience.
So here goes the deal. So I wrote that book, right? A Pair of Wings. And my goal is book, movie, just because I love movies, because the same way you guys do, I can tell. And my goal is 100 Black women in flight school by the year 2035. And here's why. So there are 100,000 people who fly at the professional level. Of that number, 6% on a great day are women. And 3% on a great day, between 2 and 3% are African American. The number of Black women who fly for a living at this level are less than 100. There are 150 if you include everybody, military, cargo. That's a number that Sisters of the Skies uses. And if you look at, say, Black women in institutions or in organizations, you're looking at sometimes single digit. In my company, we have the most. United Airlines has the most. They're 15 out of 11,000. So our goal is to change that. And here's why. It's not just a nice thing to do, but for a long time, to your question, there's been a lack of access and there's been a lack of money. And those two things are true. They were true, they are true. And here's the deal. Right now, we're in a pilot shortage. Before the pandemic, we were in a pilot shortage. I stayed in the same hotel right after the lockdown went into effect, and we were still flying some missions that were cargo related. And I happened to stay in Chicago, where we did a huge pickup and a delivery, and it was, I don't remember how many passengers. I think there were like 2 people on board. And I looked out my almost the same window where I am right now. There was no one on the street. Before the pandemic, we had a pilot shortage. Now back on the other side of the pandemic, we still have a pilot shortage. And we need to look at a labor force, right? We need to look at a labor pool that's virtually been untapped. We used to have such a high percentage of military pilots. As the military trains less pilots, and as there are less people ready to go, and as we change the type of flying that we do in the military, unmanned aircraft system, those sorts of things, we have less ready to go people. And so we need to look at different pools of people. It's a good for business, not just, oh my goodness, we're going to do this just to make things nice. It has nothing to do with it. We need to look at talent pools that have never been tapped.
Absolutely. And we believe if you can see it, you can be it. Not everybody is blessed with an imagination and determination like Bessie Coleman. Not everybody could overcome such odds and such hardships. So we want to make it easier for women and minorities. We want to help. It's better for society. As you say, Carole, it's better for America. It makes us a better country and a better, it's better for the world.
Here's the other thing that we learned, right? So we don't want people to go through this over and over again, because Bessie did go through it and she went through it first, right? So that's one thing. But the other thing is that what a lot of studies have found is that when women do better, families do better. When families do better, communities do better. When communities do better, nations do better. So I don't mean to go on a feminist rant or anything, but this is a proven fact. When women do better, families are increased, they're enhanced, they do better. And so I think that that's what we owe our country. That's what we owe women. And to reach where we were from where the WASPs were, or from certainly where Bessie Coleman came from. It's why would we ever? Why would we want that?
And Carole, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just want to say it, like you didn't know about Bessie Coleman. It's broken my heart a couple times to interview women in the military, women pilots in the military, of all races, who have never heard of the WASP, have never heard of Bessie Coleman, have never heard of Mildred Hemmons Carter and Janet Harmon Bragg, 2 African-American women who flew in the 40s at Tuskegee Airfield, who were denied entry into the WASP because our military was segregated. I mean, Mildred Hemmons Carter was finally inducted into the WASP in 2011, months before she died. But it's heartbreaking to think about some of those challenges, but also, I just think we're a better nation, we're better people, we're better individuals the more we know about our past and how rich it is.
How rich it is and how powerful it is. I mean, to say that we won't bury someone in Arlington National Cemetery to, I mean, these are all things in the last decade, right? So there are many things that we have to come to terms with, that we have to come to terms with before. When I walk through an airport, people, you said it, have to see it to believe it, don't even believe that I'm real.
Yeah, it's definitely, I've worked with so many women in aviation over my life, and I've heard so many stories, Carole, about people still being really surprised by women at all flying. Just like a really quick story. So I was working really closely with the people at the San Diego International Airport doing outreach events a few years ago, and I was on a career panel. It's a long story, but I was on a career panel, and I brought actually a United pilot friend of mine with me to be on the panel. And before the event started, one of the women who works, get this, works for the head of the airport and has worked there for 12 years, walked up to my friend, shook her hand and said, "I've actually never spoken to a female pilot." And I looked at her and I said, "You've worked at the airport for 12 years. She said, "Yes, I know. And I've never shaken the hand of a female pilot." I mean, that's how horrifying it is in our industry, and women like you and all of the others getting out there, 6% or not. And by the way, I think 4% are airline pilots. There was a statistic, Carole, I don't know if it's still true. It's probably sadly still true. This is, when I do public speaking, this is the one thing that really makes people's eyes open up. I had heard about 2 years ago that you could take every female captain, airline captain. So for those of you, front left seat, that every female airline captain could fit in one Airbus 380. Because there's 500 and something of them, and that's it. And it's just what we all wrestle with. And I do want to give a shout out to, for sure, the two organizations that you have mentioned, Carole, for those listening in. So Women in Aviation International, it's WAI.org. I've been a member for 20 years, chapter president now 3 times. It's an amazing organization which really, really helped Carole greatly, as you've all heard, with mentoring and scholarships and networking and for every single possible career field, not just pilot, air traffic controller, aircraft dispatcher, my favorite field that nobody knows exists for the most part. So look them up if you need help. Also OBAP, the Organization of Black Aviation Professionals, it's obap.org. I've actually been a guest speaker for OBAP about aerospace engineering, another phenomenal organization doing a lot to help anyone who's interested at all. So thank you for mentioning both of those, Carole, because there's so many nonprofits out there that can provide women and minorities, if you don't mind me saying that, all kinds of assistance that you may not know is available, and they're here to help, and they do a great job. So
you said it, Jill.
All of those
scholarships, there's mentoring. Sisters of the Skies is an outgrowth of OBAP.
Yeah.
And then there's another organization which we haven't even mentioned, but I would be remiss if I did not mention it. And that is Lieutenant Colonel Luke Weathers Flight Academy. So that flight academy is a 501c3 flight academy, started through OBAP in Olive Branch, Mississippi.
Yeah.
Run by 2 airline pilots, one from UPS, Captain Jeff Harrison, and then Captain Albert Glenn. And those 2 gentlemen run the day-to-day of about 40 to 50 students every single year. And it's just amazing.
Yeah. So we have about 5 minutes left. As a reminder, please, if you have any questions for any of us, put them in the Facebook comments. There is a comment, we're trying to confirm it, but haven't yet. But there's a comment from someone named Molly who wrote, "Our mom and other amazing women," and says that her mom's name is Mary J. McCrae. We're not sure she was a WASP, but if she was, that's really phenomenal. And thank you, Molly, for that comment. A couple other folks have just thanked us, which is very sweet.
Carole, I have a quick question for, I don't know if it's a question or maybe you can elaborate, but I absolutely loved the chapter where Bessie learns to fly. I think it's chapter 20 or 21, kind of those series, and it's after that 9-mile walk. My God. And she's taking her first flight, and the thing that I loved about it is it reminded me a lot about our WASP, talking about flying. And I just wondered, and for you as a pilot, what does it feel like to fly? What is that sense of being in the air in a plane? You know, what does that give you, and what's so magical about it?
All right, so Hilary and Jill, you guys are gonna make me cry because first of all, you read my book. First of all,
I read mine on Kindle. I got the Kindle because I was like, 400 pages. I'm gonna get that on Kindle.
large
I want a copy. I want a signed copy too for my library, for my display, for my bookshelf.
it's on its way. So a couple things. Like, I don't think I would have been able to have written that book if I had not had the experiences that I did. I had those shoes literally walking in her footsteps, right? Having the experience for 3 summers in a row, I flew that biplane airplane at 1941 Waco. And the guy who owns it, Mike Criado, had a fellow who worked for him. His name was Eric. There were 3 pilots who flew the airplane. And they would give biplane rides in the summer. And you could sign up for either just a nice sunset cruise or you could do stunts. So I said, well, guys, this is my project. You know, I want to tell you what I'm doing. And so Eric had 2 children. He worked during the day. And I said, Eric, I have an idea, just like Bessie Coleman did. She said, I'm going to train you to do stunts so you'll fix my airplane. I said to Eric, I want to watch your kids so you'll teach me how to do stunts. I learned that from Bessie. Good old fashioned watering. I did that for 3 summers. Had 4 boys for 3 summers. Oh, it was just a heck of a lot of fun, actually. There were more bugs and snakes and toads than I had ever discovered before, but it was all good. I don't think I could have written any of those scenes without having lived those things, without having soloed myself. And so, you know, the notion that I would be a first person so that you would be a fly on the wall in Bessie Coleman's life, that was getting so close that you could feel what it must have been like to be a Black woman at the turn of the century. Just thereafter, flying planes, learning from dogfighters in the right after the First World War. And so I've even done little things like put a cameo in there for Brad Pitt because he's a pilot. So in my head, it was learning and then doing.
That's amazing.
Can I ask you, did Bessie fly in air shows in the South?
She did. So her first show when she comes back, so she goes over to Europe once to France, and she flies in the northern part of France in Britannia. And when she gets there, the flight school is not training anybody because they've had 2 females die. And they're like, oh my God, France cannot lose its women. We can't lose our mothers. So she goes to the Quadrone school all the way up in the north. And when I went there, I literally followed in her steps, which surprised me after reading Doris Rich's book, which was such a guide for me, right? Queen Bess Daredevil Aviator, Smithsonian Press. What was shocking to me was that the flight school was on the beach, not flying over the mustard fields in France. And so, boom, my brain lit up. You had to understand the tides and the moons and how long you had to be out before the water ate up your runway. So to answer your question, all of these things were things I learned literally tracking her life.
That's great. That's great. So we do have a question from Elizabeth who asks, what would be the best sources to find scholarly information or primary sources on women pilots? And I would say not only the WAI website, but the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum website has quite a bit. The WASP Museum website out of Sweetwater has information on it. Carole, do you have any sources for that to add?
Sure. Mention the big one. Smithsonian would be a huge one. OBAP had a traveling exhibit, which we're now putting online, you know, in the era of COVID. Since it's funny, we used to say, one of my mentors, Captain Glenn, said, you know, before we used to have a hard time getting the kids to the airport. Now we're in people's living room, just like today. So those are amazing things that have come out of this global pandemic. And I would say any of those sources would be remarkable. Penn State, I'm certain, is another place to look since that's one of our partners. A lot of the universities have amazing resources. And
Yeah,
these
I
We
would
can
say,
put them in the comments, Jill, below the video. We can add
yeah,
some.
fabulous,
some like-
fabulous. And one last comment, Vicky writes from San Diego, a shout out to Jean Landis, one of the WASP, who is still alive at 103. I actually was the president of WAI San Diego for 4 years and have met Jean once, and she's really amazing. So I think we're out of time. So first of all, Carole, we can't thank you enough for taking the time today, for being such an incredible inspiration, for writing your phenomenal book. Please, everyone, go buy a copy of Pair of Wings. For those of you that subscribe to our Fly Girls Red Door Films newsletter, and if you don't, by the way, you should, and you should get a hold of Hilary. You know that this is, as I said in the beginning, the second interview series for Dare Mighty Things, and the first with the amazing Carole Hopson. Join us next week on Tuesday, I believe, where we will interview Kim Kish, who is an extremely accomplished and also very impressive young corporate pilot. So you'll hear about a different slice of being a pilot here in our wonderful world. So thank you, everyone. Again, if we didn't answer your Facebook question or comment, we will try to get to it online. And you can watch this whole series on the Fly Girls website. And any other closing comments from you lovely ladies?
I would love to say one last thing. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much. I will tell you this, that 20% of every book sale that you make goes to the Jet Black Foundation. So our goal is to raise $7 million to 100 Black women through flight school by the year 2035. Gonna do it. Gonna finish what Bessie started 100 years ago.
Fantastic. Oh, Carole, we'll be talking because there's a lot of ways in which I know we'll want to collaborate. We're always stronger together, stronger united. I would just like in closing to say a very, very, very happy birthday from all of us at the Red Door Films to a very special lady, a dear friend, one of our main characters. Today is her birthday, Elise Stevens-Floor, who actually lied about her age to get into the WASP. She was a little too young. So there you go. And her story is just incredible. She grew up in Utah. She was a Mormon and she always wanted to fly. And she saw the butterflies and the birds over her. And she said, I want to be like them. So if you want to wish Elise a happy birthday, you are welcome to leave a comment. We'll make sure that she sees it. You can send us a video. We do go and visit her. And you can also email it to Hilary with one L, Hilary, at thereddoorfilms.film, and we'll share your wishes with Elise.
Thanks, Hilary. So thank you all for joining, and hopefully we'll see you next week.
Happy birthday, Hilary.
Thank you, Jill.